welcome to Boswell Book Company's both in-person and virtual event series. I'm Daniel from Boswell. We are very honored to welcome in person Joshua Jay, the author of How Magicians Think, Misdirection, Deception, and Why Magic Matters. The book has been receiving raves, including from fellow magician David Copperfield, who said Joshua Jay is a superb, innovative conjurer with an unrelenting love of the art. This captivating book is proof of that passion. Jay is also the author of Magic, the Complete Course, and for Children, Big Magic for Little Hands, and many other books. He's performed in more than 100 countries. He's a former world champion in sleight of hand and helped the Postal Service with their Art of Magic postage stamps. He was recently named Magician of the Year 2020 by the Society of American Magicians Parent Assembly. We are particularly excited to say that today's event, Jay will be in conversation with Congressman Mark Pocan. Please give them a big hand. Thank you very much, both. This mic is on. Okay, your mic is on.
Well, welcome everybody. Thanks so much for being here. How many of you like magic and that's why you're here, just to get an idea? All right, so a lot of you. All right. Oh, I see people in costume in the back. Look at that.
Wow.
Very nice. Very nice.
Disappointed in the rest of you. Could have dressed like that.
So, well, my name is Mark Pocan and I'm a congressman from the Madison, Wisconsin area. And you're probably wondering what I'm doing here. And it has nothing to do with politics. It has everything to do with a shared love that Josh and I have for magic. I did magic shows when I started when 8. I started doing magic. I did a lot of shows in high school, paid for college doing magic shows, and then kind of checked off and did this political career for quite a long time. Got back into things back in 2010, and I went to a magicians convention. There are conventions for magicians. And one of the 3 main lectures that I remember was this guy named Joshua Jay. And Josh is a really very, very talented magician, but on many of the night shows, and has had his own off-Broadway show that I've seen in New York. He is the owner of, I think, I would argue, the largest magic store in the country, maybe even in the world, because he does it with a business partner who's out of England, Vanishing Inc. It's a website, but it's a very comprehensive site with all sorts of magicians who run it, who give advice to people on the things that they're getting. And he's an author of many books, including a couple books that I probably bought more than any other book, because I keep giving them to young people I meet in my district who are interested in magic, because they are truly the best that are out there and treat people with real respect who are trying to learn magic. But Josh has written a new book that is really for people who aren't necessarily magicians. Magicians love it as well, but it's how magicians think. It's all the questions that Josh has been asked by so many people when they see him do magic. You know, what about this? What about that? Josh put a book together with all these ideas. So it gives you a whole lot more about something that as you raise your hand, you enjoy watching magic. Well, this gives you a lot more to understand about what all makes that up. So with that, Josh, I think that was a long introduction, but let me just hand it off to Josh to talk about it a little bit. We're going to have a little discussion. I'll ask him a few questions, and then we really want to open it up, and we want to know whatever questions you might have, and we may get some virtual questions as well. So without any more ado, let me introduce my friend, Joshua Jay.
Oh, thank you. Thanks. No, best greetings to everybody watching from home, and thank you all so much for coming out and braving this weather and spending an afternoon with us. I'm happy to have you here. Thank you, Congressman. That's really kind. It's been an honor to spend the day with him here and seeing some. We went to Taliesin today, which is great, and so I'm very jazzed about that. And in a way, maybe that can serve as an introduction. So I'm really interested, because I'm on the road all the time, in all of these other crafts. Like, I don't want to be an architect. I don't want to design a home, but I'm fascinated by the way Frank Lloyd Wright thinks. I'm fascinated by the book, How Music Works by David Byrne. I don't want to make music, but I'm interested in how people do things at a high level in their own craft. And what I recognized is that my chosen craft, our chosen craft, gets very little respect. Like, think about this, not to start on a downer, but if any one of us wanted to appreciate stand-up comedy a little more, maybe we just love it, we saw something on Netflix, we would go to the performing arts section of this store, or maybe just the arts section. I didn't look particularly here. If you want to do something on dance, movies, cinema appreciation, it's all there. Do you know where you find my book? Puzzles and games. That's where magic is found, in a bookstore. The people who categorize these things put magic automatically in the puzzles and games section, which tells us something about where my craft is thought of in the zeitgeist, right? It is thought of as something to figure out, a simple, trivial little diversion in which you try and figure stuff out. This book is my attempt for people to see it for what it really is, which is an utterly fascinating and engrossing craft. When I'm in the middle of my shows and I'm performing, I often have this urge to be like, somebody reacts or there's a big round of applause to go, you thought that was cool. Wait till you see how it works. It's so much cooler. But you can't share that stuff, of course. You don't want to spoil the art form. So I asked the very simple question, would it be possible to peel back the curtain and show people this truly? And I don't think it's just because it's what I've spent my life dedicated to. I think everybody could appreciate the ingenuity, the engineering, the creativity involved in magic performed at a high level. And that's what this book attempts to do.
So let me ask you a question right off of that. So if you're a comedian, you just have to deliver lines. When you're a magician, there's a little more involved, right? It's like walking, chewing gum, and maybe playing chess and riding a skateboard all at the same time, right? Because there's more things involved. And you talk about that a little bit. Explain why it's different, what magicians do.
Well, so magic is the only performing art that I'm aware of in which you, meaning you, the audience, play a huge role. So imagine theater, cinema, dance, comedy. These are things that the performer performs at us, right? We go see Dave Chappelle and he's in the room and that's amazing, but he is performing a rehearsed monologue for us. And other than a comment about a sneeze or somebody shouts something, it's pretty much exactly the same in Milwaukee as it is in Cleveland, as it is in LA. A magic show is not the same. A magic show done well really is a jazz improvised event in which the card that you name or the thing that you choose or the bill that you give me really affects the outcome of the show. And that makes it incredibly hard because of what you say. You are constantly having to, what's going on in my head is a million things other than what's coming out of my mouth as you try to gauge a performance and live in the moment and make it seem that way. It's really a difficult thing to do well. The other thing is, like, magic demands more or less perfection, because if you make the slightest error, you've ruined everything, right? If there is one little aberration in what you're doing, or I think I saw something in his hand, or I think he dropped this thing, the illusion is shattered. You can't be pretty decent at magic. It either is deceptive or it's not. There's no, well, he was very funny. His magic sucked, but he was very funny. That doesn't really exist. There's no lane for that. So, to me, that's what makes it all engrossing, because it is so difficult to pull off.
So in your book too, you talk about some of your favorite magicians. So everyone's heard of Houdini, especially since he used to live in Wisconsin at one point in his life. We've heard of David Copperfield and Penn and Teller, but the line starts to drop pretty quickly on name recognition. But there's some really outstanding magicians that are out there. Could you just talk a little bit about some of why you like a magician, what you would say makes someone your favorite magician?
Yeah. So in the book, I sort of, let's back up for a second. The other thing is, if I were to just sit across the table from anybody here, we could have a great conversation about TV shows or movies or the food that's being served on our table or the Elton John song playing on the radio. But not everybody has fluency to talk about what makes a magician great or not so great. And a common question I'm asked is like after covered in sweat after a show, somebody will say like, that was really great. So do you just do standard tricks, or are those your like? Of course they're my own. Like I'm not doing old standards. Like magicians create their own tricks. So a few things that we can talk about that I look for, and then I'll tell you some magicians you've never heard of, but you can seek out on YouTube because they're really worth your time. Is I'm looking for seamlessness, which is exactly what I just talked about. The best magicians make it so everything is seamless. You don't see little imperfections. You don't see problems. What you see is the complete vision that they have in mind. And that's pretty rare. So seamlessness is something that I look for, and originality. I mean, magicians who really innovate are magicians who are creating their own tricks, dreaming up what's possible, and then making those things possible. I'm really happy in the book to shine a light on areas that I think the public believes magic is deficient in. There are so few magicians of color and female magicians that the public can name, right? If you name a list of magicians, you're mostly naming white males, but there's this incredible history of women in magic and people of color who had incredible careers. So I'll tell you a couple of those and then a couple other favorites. So there's a magician nobody's heard of named Adelaide Herman. And if you can imagine, she was in the golden age of magic, call it 1880 to 1930. With the end of vaudeville, the end of the golden age happened. But Alexander Herman, he is the prototypical magician, the goatee, the top hat. When you see magician and it's that look, top hat and tails, you're actually looking at a guy. It's Alexander Herman. And he died very suddenly. And his wife, who was an assistant, I don't like to use that term, we call partners in performing, because often the assistant's the one doing the real work. But she really was known as and preferred to be called an assistant. She handed him his props. She did the unthinkable when he died, and she took over his touring illusion show. Now, she was in her mid-30s when she did this, but she toured into her 70s. And was an incredible talent, an original magician. And the great coda on this story is that in our lifetime, I think in the early 2000s, somebody discovered an unpublished manuscript of hers in an attic. And so it was given to Margaret Steele, a contemporary female magician, and she annotated and published this book. So we have a memoir of what it was like to tour in the golden age of magic from certainly the world's first touring full illusion show female magician. I tell the story in the book about Henry Box Brown. It doesn't get any crazier than this. Henry Box Brown was born an enslaved person, and his first trick was that he mailed himself to freedom. This really happened. He put himself in a box and mailed himself to Philadelphia, where he broke out of this box with the cooperation of abolitionists who helped him plan it, and ended up touring the world, lived in England for about a decade, Canada as well, but became a polished performer as a magician and a ventriloquist and a speaker, and really prospered in his life after he was, made his own liberation, so to speak. A couple other magicians I'll tell you to look up. There's a fabulous magician named Richard Turner. Richard Turner does incredible sleight of hand, but what most people don't know about Richard Turner when they watch the whole performance, he does things with cards, mostly cheating techniques, is at the end of his performance, it becomes clear that he's completely blind. And you'd never know it watching, but think about, I spend so much time studying my sleights either on video or in front of a mirror, just trying to perfect what we call flashes, which is like, it may look good from the front, but from the back it flashes, or it looks good to you, but my sight lines are bad to the people on the sides. You have to make it good if there's a balcony. This is somebody who can't see and is doing some of the most difficult sleight of hand and has it perfected. So he's somebody that I really admire. And I also really admire, when people ask who is the greatest living magician, I actually don't believe it's one of the big household name guys at all. It's a magician from Spain, and you've seen him before. We were talking about him at lunch, named Juan Tamaris. And Juan Tamaris is pretty well known in his native Spain, and he's older now, he's in his 70s. But Juan Tamaris totally invented his own subgenre of magic. It's mostly card tricks, but he acts crazy on stage. He's got like the craziest energy. And to see this guy is to see somebody having so much fun and so over the top. And the things that he does, which I explain some of his stunts in my book, are so unbelievable that it just takes a pretty beautiful mind to even think of those things.
So, and Richard Turner, I've seen him as well, and completely blew my mind
amazing.
For someone who's blind and doing what they're doing with cards. Part of, I think, how I got into politics was because as a kid, I was in front of audiences doing magic, right? You got up there and you had to learn that. And now that's second nature to what I have to do with my new day gig. But one of the things that you've done that's extremely interesting, in New York Times did a long story about it, is you have been a pen pal correspondent to a number of people who've been in prison who had an interest in magic. And some of the stories around that have been some of the most fascinating. You want to talk about that a little bit? Because I know it's been really important to you and what you've done.
Yeah. It started with my first book, which came out in 2008. It's called Magic, the Complete Course. It's kind of like my idea of curriculum if you're starting at zero and you want to get into magic. And unbeknownst to me, the way it works in prison facilities is they have sort of a very limited short list of books that are approved, and they have budgets to stock their libraries. And my book somehow got approved. It's a nonviolent activity. It's something you can do alone. It's something you can practice in a cell. So I start getting letters, start trickling in from prison systems, from incarcerated people saying, hey, I read your book, I read everything in it, and I've got a question on page 292, or now I want to know what's the next step. And I suppose in the beginning it was like a morbid curiosity. I'd never been to a prison and I was interested. And so I started writing with these people, and I immediately recognized the potential of what I had going on here, in that these are people who can spend dozens and dozens of hours a week working on perfecting their magic. They can hone their creative skills. And most importantly, in the one probably gloomiest place I can imagine to be performing, these are people who can spread this special thing without special, you can do it with a water bottle or a deck of cards or a pencil. And you can spread this amazing feeling around to maybe people who need it most. So I started sort of codifying the way I would go about doing it. And I started working on how I would teach these people. And the other thing is, when you only have, now it's different. Some of them, these students can call me, we can do video chats, but 10 years ago, it was snail mail only. And I would say, I got basically one rule. I will not judge you no matter what it is, but you have to tell me why you're in, tell me your background, tell me your story, and I will teach you the tricks that you want to learn. And in so doing, I made some real connections and friends with some of these people. One person that I was writing with for, I think it was 12 years, and then he was serving a 20-year sentence. He got out, and with this newfound skill of magic, became a professional magician, and that's what he does now. In another case, it's crazy. So I was in Portland last week, and there was a guy. So in Portland, it was a very big event, and I got there like an hour and a half early. I was doing a big show that day, and there was a guy sat in the back, and he was like sort of expressionless. And I waved to him and I said, "You're here early. I'm just going to be setting up for the next hour." And I set up my show, and he's like still there. And then he waits and he stays there till like every book is signed and we're all done. And he comes up to me finally and he says, "My name is Dan." And I said, "Oh, hi, Dan." And he said, "I'm Brandon's dad." And I said, "Hi, Brandon's dad." And he said, No, Brandon Burge." Oh, and I've been writing to this person who's been incarcerated for a very long time. And he starts telling me his story. So he relocated to Portland so that he could be near his son. He has no interest in magic, but he learns magic online so that when he visits his son, he can teach his son magic. And there's this whole lives. It's amazing when you get involved to see the way that lives are changed by somebody being incarcerated and how magic can give people this like little touch of humanism. So the New York Times did a story on it about a year ago. And since then, I think everybody in prison who is in need of a hobby has started writing to me. So now it's an even bigger thing. And it's like a serious, way I spend a lot of my time now is teaching those people.
Well, we want to make sure we're opening it up for questions. So if you have a question, we'll have you ask it from where you're at. I'll repeat the question since we're doing this on Zoom as well. So everyone who might be watching will also hear it. And we can go from there. This book is it 52 different
exactly 50.
questions? And the reason 52, if you know, is there's 52 cards and a deck of cards. We're certainly consistent. So we've got 52 questions here, but we want your questions today to share. Also, Josh has a podcast named How Magicians Think, and you can also listen to that. And by the way, it's one of the most professionally produced podcasts because I've been listening to it when I fly to Washington, D.C. Often, and it's a really great addition to hopefully this book you'll be picking up today. So
yeah, it's very kind. And I have nothing to pitch or sell you or anything. I hope you'll check out the book. But yes, I would really love it if you checked out the podcast. It's free wherever you get your podcast. But it's a limited series of 12 episodes. They're half hour each. And it's definitely not just for magicians. It's on creative pursuits in every direction. But I'm really proud of it. And I hope you'll check it out.
Great. So if there are questions, we'd love to take anyone's questions. Yes, right here. So I'm going to repeat the question. This gentleman said he used to do magic like I used to, took a long hiatus like I used to. And he's just wondering if Josh ever did that sort of break and how he got back into it, if he did that. And Josh?
It's going to sound trite and like rehearsed, but it's the real truth. And it's what I often say. I often get sick of the business aspect of show business. I get very tired of I was on a plane all day yesterday from morning till after midnight and almost didn't get my bags. And that part gets very old and living out of hotels. But the one thing I can say, and it surprises even me, is that I've never grown even an instant tired of the actual craft. I mean, it's nuts. So I'm on a book tour for 4 months. It's something like 65 events, 45 different cities. And I think that there are a total of 6 nights off between September and May. And one of them was in Las Vegas, where I came from before I was here. I had 1 night off. 1 night off when I'm not talking about magic, doing magic in front of an audience, signing books, whatever. And I spent that night off going to 2 magic shows and hanging out with magicians. And I look at myself, I go, what am I doing? But this is an obsession. It's an obsession. And so it's true. Like I'll get off tour. We did 240 shows of my New York show over 18 months. And it's a lot, it was only 5 nights a week, but those 5 nights were 2 shows. So I'm at the space for like 8 hours a day. And it's, you're on stage the whole time. And truly, the minute that was over, I didn't want to take a break. I didn't go on a vacation. I didn't like put the deck of cards. I couldn't wait to get started on new material. And that's kind of what magic is for me. When I was a kid, I did everything kids do. T-ball and chess and chess lessons and music lessons and stuff. And none of it clicked. I wasn't good at any of it. I didn't like it. And then the minute my dad showed me my first magic trick, it just made sense. I can't explain it to you, but the way my mind worked, it clicked for me and I understood it and I wanted that to be my life.
Oh, so another internet question about, are there any book recommendations from Josh for people who used to do magic and as a kid and getting back into it, looking for current books that might be recommended?
Well, I would pose a question back to whoever asked this, and I'm very particular about this. I know a lot of teachers in magic want to guide students to, don't do that, don't do big illusions. You need to do the cards first and then cups and balls second. I would say figure out what kind of magic you want to learn and pursue that. I mean, I'm hesitant to give you a specific title because if what you love is mentalism, it's going to be a different recommendation than if what you love is magic history or if what you love is impromptu magic. I mean, there's so many different subgenres. I mean, not to tout my own stuff, but there really wasn't a great beginner's book. The best that they had up to 2008 was a really lovely book called The Mark Wilson Course in Magic. It sold gazillions of copies. But in that book, each trick is about a paragraph long. And I don't believe you can really master much of anything with a paragraph description, sometimes 2 and 3 paragraphs, 1 illustration. So my book, Magic, the Complete Course, we tried to do like, I think about 25 photos and 7 or 8 pages per piece so that you could really dive in. But after that, I would just get lost and lose yourself in whatever interests you the most.
Now, is that book the book that also includes a DVD?
Yeah, and now it's a download, but it was a DVD.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm getting old. All right. Other questions for Josh? Yes, please. So the question was, Josh, you've written several books over a long period of time. How has that evolved? Your first book, was that Magic Atlas?
Yeah.
How old were you?
17.
17, and you just turned 40. I don't know if that's okay to say.
Yeah, that's
out loud.
fine.
All right.
It's out of the bag now. Thanks for the question. I'll tell you that here's the truth bomb. This was a very hard book to sell. So my publisher is the same publisher of my other books, and my trick books have sold very, very well, which I'm very grateful for and blessed about. So they're constantly, about every 2 or 3 years, the publisher hovers around like, ready for the next trick book? Because after Magic, the Complete Course, which is the first and still most successful one in terms of how many it's sold, it's in like a bunch of languages and stuff. We did a card magic book, and I enjoyed that. And after that, we did a kids magic book. And they wanted more and more because those sell, right? Everybody, every holiday season, somebody's getting into magic. They want to use those books. But I didn't want to write any more tricks books. It was odd to me when people would say, hey, Joshua J., my brother's cousin's uncle, he really loves magic. So I got him your book to teach him some tricks. And I thought, again, what a weird disconnect that if somebody loves magic, why does that automatically mean they want to learn how to do small tricks for somebody else? Like, I love music. I can't read music at all, but you wouldn't get me a book on how to play guitar because I like rock music, So I thought that there was this lane for something that didn't exist, which was a love letter to this craft. And I love reading about art and architecture and music and all these other things about something that isn't how to do it, it's how to appreciate it. So I have been thinking about this book for a decade and couldn't sell it. And finally, when I read David Byrne's How Music Works, which is a great book, and you should all check it out, I'm sure they have it here. This was a book just about what he loved and hated about the music industry and about what he learned touring as a musician and about what music moved him. And I basically went back with my agent and said, okay, it's this, but for magic. And they all went, oh, yeah, do that. And so the first thing that I did was I knew that to sell it and to really make it something that would be interesting for a lot of people, I would have to do the big strokes, which would be I'd have to spend time with Copperfield and Blaine and Penn and Teller. And so I shadowed them and I arranged to go spend time with them and meet them all. And they're all 3 total stone cold weirdos, but in the best way, in the absolute best way. They're all geniuses and virtuosos and quirky and eccentric in all the ways that people who are wonderful at their craft have to be. And so there are dedicated chapters to each of those. And those sort of prove to the publisher that like I could get the big things that you'd want to say on TV and that you'd want to get pull quotes from. And that let me do all the things I wanted to do. Like one of the chapters, we create a trick together. I take you through how I start and think about an idea and go through it and create a trick together. And it allows me to shine a light on all these magicians you've never heard of, which we've already talked about, and allows me to explore the science of magic, because there's so much science, secret science, that we hide the mechanics of. But really, if you have an understanding of physics and science and chemicals, you can figure a lot of these things out.
Yeah, I know in the podcast, I'm trying to remember what chapter here, but don't you talk about charlatans also essentially in magic? And talk about that just for a second. We'll take a question again. But that was one of your more recent podcasts. I remember reading the book about your little excursion. Yeah.
So you mean charlatans or cheaters? I talk about both. Yeah. I mean,
cheaters would be the better.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, card magic, which is one of my favorite subgenres of magic, we take a lot of our inspiration from the card cheaters repertoire, which means that some of my friends are professional cheats that cheat people out of money at card games. As Ricky Jay used to say, these people are my friends. It's a nefarious line of work. It's not particularly ethical, but what we're after is trying to make things invisible. And these are people who are experts at making things invisible. So many years ago, I wrote for 12 years for Magic Magazine, the biggest trade publication. And in an article that never came out because of the story I'm going to tell you, I was shadowing a cheat. I was shadowing a cheat and seeing how they would go into private games and do things. And we went into a private game and sitting at this cheater's table right there. And I wasn't at the game. I was just watching and trying to observe how somebody goes undercover and does this, was another cheat. We had found another cheat at a game with a cheat. And I ended up writing about it for something else, and it inspired a really great fictional book, which you can also probably find here, called Bluff, which one of my literary professors took my very poorly written paper and said, do you mind if I fictionalize this, and turned it into a whole book by Mike Cardos. It's really great.
Yes. So the question is, can you explain your process when you're devising a new trick?
Sure. Thanks for the question. There isn't a perfect process, because if there were, I would just do nothing but sit in my room and devise great magic tricks. But what I can tell you is that I tend to approach creating magic from the audience's perspective. So it starts with, I like to describe magic as a chess game between the spectator and the magician. And I'm trying to stay 1 or 2 or 10 moves ahead. So many magicians go, oh, this is this slime, and it dries in 6 seconds, but it dries clear. And if I put it in my sleeve, it could drip down, and I could put it around a coin, and they sort of start with method and think, what could I do with this? I've never had much success that way. I have always sort of said, what I would like to do is borrow a credit card from somebody and put it in a block of ice. So that was a trick in my New York show. And I start with, I don't know anything about ice. I don't know anything about the properties of ice, how to create ice short term, how to encapsulate something in ice, what happens to a credit card if you put it in ice. I had to figure all that out. And there are ice people in this world, and you have to track them down and figure it out. And there are garment people in this world who know how to protect ice so that it doesn't drip or leak or do anything of that nature. And so you start with a very clean image of, I see a credit card in a block of ice, and hand it to somebody so that they can verify their credit card is truly inside. And you work backward from there. And truly, I'm not exaggerating, 99 times out of 100, it doesn't work. There are so many tricks I would love to do, but turns out they're truly impossible. But 1 out of 100 times, 1 out of 20 times, I can develop it to the point where it goes into my show. And probably 9 out of 10 times there, it comes right out because it just doesn't work the way I hope it does. But once in a very, very, very great while, you get something that works, and then it's a beautiful feeling.
Oh, we have another internet question. Okay, so that was a multiple question. They enjoyed the chapter in the book about David Blaine. They're asking, 1, what you think about danger magic, 2, what you think about the bullet catch trick, and 3, what's the most dangerous thing you've done in your shows?
Right. Thanks for the question. You can't really even approach this question without talking a little bit about, of course, Harry Houdini. And Houdini was not the greatest magician in history, not even close. And that's what a lot of people surmise and think. Houdini was not a particularly skilled magician at all. If you want more on this, the podcast episode that came out last week is all about this very topic about Houdini. But the one thing that we can say, the 2 things we can say about Houdini was he was definitely the greatest marketer in magic history. He really understood public relations and how to make people come out. And then connected to that is the other thing you have to say about Houdini was that he was perhaps the first to truly capitalize on the idea of raising the stakes. An existential crisis that all of us as magicians go through at some point is, this is all pointless. This is all really pointless. Me making a red ball jump from this hand to this hand and a credit card go into ice and a bill change into $100 bill. It's really pointless. It's just all silliness. There's no point to any of it. It's not changing anybody's lives. It's not improving the world. It isn't even real. It just looks like what it's supposed to be. These are the things that keep us up at night. But Houdini recognized that if you used the classical tenets of drama, any kind of story writing, right? The first thing they say is raise the stakes. Have that same conversation, that dialogue, but now, as Hitchcock would say, there's a bomb underneath the table about to go off, right? You're raising the stakes, suspense. And the most immediate way, the most visceral way to raise the stakes is to make it dangerous. So now Houdini recognized, look, they don't come out by the tens of thousands to watch Houdini make feather flowers appear on stage, which he did. They come out by the tens of thousands to watch Houdini survive. If his tricks were a matter of life and death, you wanted to be there because you wanted to see if he would survive and come out from the water tank. You wanted to see if he wouldn't fall to his death in a pit of fire. And to now get to the second part of the question, so David Blaine, David Copperfield, many people have since been able to tap into this such fascinating and critical and dark element of if we can make our tricks a matter of life and death, we've got something that grips the public. Now, I liken that a little bit to like the gore and horror films. Like, I get it. It's powerful. It works. It elicits a reaction. I don't want my work to be all about, shock value all the time. So I haven't made a career out of dangerous magic. The one trick that I do that is dangerous is a trick that was created in India by the fakirs, the magicians of that country and that culture, which Houdini appropriated and brought to the West, which is that I swallow 20 examined regulation sewing needles, ingest them all. I swallow about 1 yard of cotton thread, and then I ingest and bring up the thread with the needles on it. And it's it's fun and people laugh when I do it, but there's real danger involved. A very good friend of mine called me not even 3 months ago and said that he had to go to the emergency room because of a malfunction in his handling of the trick. And let me tell you, that trick goes wrong, you're in big trouble. So that's about as dangerous as I get.
All right. Other questions? Yes, right up front.
I know you. I met you beforehand. You amazed me with a trick. Mason.
So the question is, what's your best trick you do, Josh?
Again, just like question with the gentleman behind you, I know this is going to sound like a cop out of an answer, but I mean this. I think it's really important for any artist, and I would include myself as a magician in that list. There's almost something wrong if the answer to that question is anything other than whatever I'm working on right now. The minute somebody is like, I'll tell you my best song, it was that hit I had 26 years ago, their creative output is more or less done. I am obsessed with whatever I'm working on. So when I hit the road, it's usually, in an 8-trick set, 1 or 2 of those are needing some polish and some work. And those are the ones that I'm most excited about. I'm just getting through the rest of the show to get to that moment so I can try it a little differently tonight, or do it this way, or try it in a different way. So it's truly whatever I'm working on right now. And I know that's probably not what you want to hear me say, like, a tiger that disappears and changes into my mom.
All right, so I'm going to add to Mason's question. There's a chapter here. What's your favorite trick?
Yeah. And that piggybacks on, like, a lot of people say, like, are you ever fooled by tricks? And I love to be fooled. I mean, I absolutely love to be fooled. It just doesn't happen the more you're in magic as much, because you gain more familiarity with methods. And so it gets harder. And it really is another one of these existential questions. I mean, imagine this. I got into magic for the same reason you got into magic, and you got into magic, and you got into. We saw a trick and we love that feeling of, no way, but that's impossible. Magic, it's fun to do magic for kids who have never seen magic before because they don't understand the game. And it is so weird. Like, I'm going to do something, but I'm not really doing it, but it's going to look like I'm doing it. And you're not going to know how I do it, and you're going to enjoy it. Like, it's a weird thing to grasp. It's not intuitive. And I love getting into magic from being fooled, but imagine the reason you get into it slowly dissipates. And the more you're into it, the less you get to be totally swept up and amazed by it. But I talk about a couple of tricks in there. One is by Penn and Teller, and it's called Cowboy Rodeo. And I watched this trick probably 8 or 9 years ago. And I wasn't just fooled. I mean, sometimes I'm fooled and I see where it's going. It's like, oh, okay, I don't know how I did, but I know how they did part of it, or just one part fooled me, or one part is backwards, and that's really interesting. But I mean, when I say I'm fooled by this trick, I mean, I felt like a layman. That's what we call you guys, by the way. We call you layman. I felt completely like a muggle again, like I was totally fooled. I didn't see it coming. And here's the idea of the trick. The idea of the trick is that Teller on stage hides behind a little barrier, and he's going to be doing the magic secretly for the spectator that gets on stage. So Penn calls up somebody. The night that I was there, it was like some guy in a NASCAR hat and long hair and glasses and stuff. And he sits them down, and Penn starts like floating this thing on the table and making this plate change from under the guy. And the guy's going crazy. But it's funny for the rest of the audience because we see Teller secretly slipping the stuff out from behind the barrier, and the guy doesn't know about Teller being there. And the last part of the trick is that the guy becomes Teller and takes off his wig and his glasses, and he's there. And in that moment, I was like totally fooled and felt just like I felt at 7 years old when I saw my dad do that first trick. And I love those. I wish I had that every single day.
So, yes. So this is a question about Mark Zuckerberg talking about this world of alternative reality. And he's wondering what a magician like Josh thinks of that.
I mean, I think that I don't have any specific opinion on that. I actually thought it was the other one that I just read in the news is, didn't Jeff Bezos just say that in a relatively short amount of time, very few people would be born on Earth, and we're going to visit Earth like we visit Yellowstone National Park now. I mean, he might be right, but it's a bonkers thing to think about. But what I think that is very much in that lane of what you're talking about is, I often wonder about the future of my craft, right? Because we have a huge problem that no magician has ever faced before 5 years ago. A huge problem, which is almost anything I would do for you if we were out and about. Oh, show me a trick, and I do it for you. With this in your pocket, you can Google it and instantly figure out, or watch a video, or think you've figured out how that trick is done. If I change ones to hundreds, you can Google ones to hundreds and find out ways that trick is done. If I change a pencil into a quarter, you can look up pencil to quarter magic trick and you might find something. So what do we do about that? Does that mean that this craft is basically over? And my answer to that is I think a lot of stage magic is in real trouble. I really do, because stage magic is a lot about the props. It's a lot about, you watch something and the thing is really the thing, and it's not a lot more than that. But I think close-up magic, which fortunately is the kind that we're both interested in, can never really be replaced because it's skill-based, right? It's not some apparatus. It's not some optical illusion. It's just really hard work. I mean, most of the things, people really want to know how I do some of the things in my show, but the truth is, like, we don't, the magician Michael Weber, we were talking about at lunch, he has a great quote. He says, magicians don't keep secrets from the public. We keep secrets for the public. And that's really a sweet way of putting it, because it's true. Another magician, Jim Steinmeier, said, magicians guard an empty safe. You guys think that the secret is the ultimate thing. Once you have it, you've unlocked the key to, but the secret, there's nothing in the safe. It's not the secret. It's just really hard work. It's doing something so many thousands of times that you can either do it superhumanly fast or superhumanly imperceptible. And it's doing these things at a high level where most of the things, if I showed you how they work, you just go, oh, that looks really hard and I'm not sure I get it. It's not like, oh, a mirror. That's never how it actually works.
And one of the things right now, how many magicians have recently won America's Got Talent too? Right?
Yeah,
It's on a
they're
good
roll.
It's on a roll right now, which is awesome. So, other questions? Yeah. So the question is, with all the traveling Josh has done, are there magician spaces or clubs or places that he's been to that are really special that he wants to share?
So the thing that I am both heartened about and saddened about is when I did my first tour, I was 18 years old and I went to like 30 countries. It took almost 2 years. And at that time, when I was an opening act, magic culture looked different everywhere you went. I mean, it was so exciting to go to Japan, where it's nothing like Western magic. In Japan, often the performer takes him or herself out of the trick, and it's all topological. It's all about the object. It's about focusing on the thing. And they would consider any magician trying to be funny or showman-like to be a distraction. And contrast that with France, where I saw Babel on the street. It's this wonderful street performer, and it's just what you would think. It's fluid and showy, and the shuffling is complex. And then you go to Argentina, and there's a tango, an actual tango influence in the magic. And Scandinavia, where the magic is like purposely nonsensical, and the weirder the better, because over there, the magician figure is often thought of as a jester. And so it's very, very strange. And it looked different depending on where you are. But then, of course, as the internet became the main way that people learned and watched magic, it all got whitewashed. It all got really washed out to the point where you may not know these names, but Michael Amar, myself, Sean Farquhar, a few of us as teachers, we now had a global audience to teach, and they all started to look like them, like us. And now I go to, I was just in Serbia, really obscure places, and people are performing my material for me. And that's not fun, because that's a very Ohio American style. Doesn't work in another way. And so what we've gained is this, I just saw a video of the most outstanding magician, and she's like 11 years old and lives in a township in Mumbai, no money or privilege or advantage. And yet through the internet, this little girl is able to do outstanding sleight of hand. And I see examples of that everywhere. So the internet's uplifted the craft in many ways, but what we've lost is just what you asked about, and these sensational magicians that I used to see everywhere I went, but now it's a little samey.
We have a Zoom question. So Susan is asking, with your online magic store, Vanishing Ink, how do you decide what you're putting out for the world to see, to be able to acquire and purchase for themselves?
Yeah, so I'm partners with my best friend, who's a UK magician, and he and I mean, it's very simple. We don't have like strict codes. We just sort of look at it and go, is this pushing new boundaries? Is this amazing? Would we like to learn this trick? And if the answer is yes, we try and make a deal. That's it.
And they have great stuff, by the way. Yes, all the way in back. Sure. So the question is, how much do you think you change? What percent year to year? And how much do you think you and most magicians have changed, say, over 25 years?
Yeah, so I'll start by taking a right turn on that question. So I was asked just this question on stage a few days ago with Teller. Teller was in Mark's seat a few days ago. And I admire Penn and Teller so much. I just think Teller is an absolute genius. And they asked him the similar question, which I actually never asked him in all the interviewing, which I thought was so interesting. They've been performing as a duo for 40 years. And the classics, they still do on stage 6 nights a week. And the person asked the very, I think, good question: how do you make it fresh? How do you not get sick of doing the same thing? And his answer immediately resonated with me. And he said, well, I spend so long losing sleep and agonizing over how to make these tricks so perfect and so fluid, with the end goal in my mind of doing them so effortlessly that it's like you're doing it for real. And I know what he's talking about there. And I talk about it in the book. Like, there's a feeling, and maybe a musician who performs would disagree with me, but I can't imagine in any other art form, when I have done a trick so many times that I don't have to think about the method or think about the secret aspect, it is a hair's width away from feeling like the real thing. I mean, it is the coolest sensation, because at that level, when I know I'm not going to mess it up, when there's no degree of risk, when I've done it with so many times and I have such confidence in it, I start to feel that power and can get into it myself. That's an amazing rush. And so he says, the tricks that I've been doing for decades, it's the best time in the world because I get to feel that feeling of magic that my audience gets. In answer to your direct question, I am sort of obsessed with the new, probably to my own detriment. I think a lot of people around me have said, you should maybe not always be trying to get the next best trick. You should, do some greatest hits shows and stuff, and stick with some of the, but I am, once I get a trick to where I'm really happy with it, it's less interesting to me. And now I want to go on and create something new and get that polished up. So I change out quite a bit, but quite a bit, maybe this would surprise you, is maybe 15 minutes a year, 15 new stage minutes a year, which means a new show every third or fourth year. It feels pretty good to me.
So I think this is right out of the book too. So, but the question is, no, it's great. Are there times that you've just explained how hard you practice and how long you do things that you mess up, and talk a little bit about that?
I'll tell you a recent story. So, I mean, the answer to that question is magicians, we have plan B, C, D, E, F, G. So while I might be cursing under my breath as I walk off stage because I'm really pissed off about how something went, I really have not done my job if you think something messed up. I mean, I don't want to make past judgment, but when a magician actually gives up, well, I guess that didn't work. I mean, that's not a good example of our craft. I mean, if I miss on this, I have a backup of a backup, and I'm going to pay it off, and you're going to leave thinking that's exactly the way it goes every night and it's supposed to go, even if I'm disappointed. And there's an element of risk in magic. Like in my show, I am shooting for the stars every night, hoping that a couple things that are 1 in 10, 1 in 100 chance can go right. And if they don't, I navigate around it, but I'm playing the audience like an instrument in that way. So the answer is generally no, but can I tell you, I did for PR for this book an appearance on Larry Wilmore's show. He used to do the Colbert, that slot, he had the Daily Show for a while, and he's a magician, Larry Wilmore's big television personality. And so I did his show, and it was virtual because this was before the book came out, getting ready for it. And I don't know what happened that day, but I was so excited to share with him this card piece that I had, and the cards were in the table in front of me, and I had him go get a deck of cards, and he shuffles his and I shuffle mine, and we get to the end and it doesn't work. And so, okay. And I quickly navigate it, but I see that he sees and knows, okay, I'm going to watch Josh dance. And so I go to plan B, and then now hold your card up and show it. And they still don't match. And okay, well, that's all right. So take that card. And now he's like, where's he going with this? And I get to the end, and I just had one of those crazy off days where I was thinking backwards and not using my head. And at one point I just had to go, hey, Larry, I'm out of ideas. I messed up. We got to cut and do it all again. And I was terribly embarrassed, but at least I copped to it.